where you decided to discuss the rich biodiversity of Northeast. And I really want to congratulate Indian Association of Research Scholars. I hope I'm pronouncing the name of the association clearly. To my mind, it's a setup of young people. And to see that young people are being conscious of how we need to address the questions of not only what bites everybody in the mainstream, but also the nooks and corners of the country, which very often remain, don't catch the attention of the mainstream. And I think this particular topic that you have chosen to deliberate on today is during today's discussion, where you are highlighting how advancing the local health traditions of a particular region become very, very important in terms of why we think this is required. And on that note, to my mind, and as you all are mostly young people, and young people have a lot to take on their shoulders in terms of being determined or described as the future of the country. But then this future cannot really become bright enough if we don't invest adequately in the future. So today, when I see all of you getting together to deliberate on, the local healing systems of Northeastern India, I think nothing could have been better than this to deliberate on in today's context. And I see this very consciously because when you look at the health systems in the country, however much we decide to invest in the health system, we haven't really been able to move to the ideal kind of proportions when it comes to, let's say, the GDP of the country for health. We are still less than 2%, and we all know about it. And I think that's where perhaps my reference is to be about investing today to make what is required tomorrow, whether you see it in the light of young people as future, or you consider it in terms of the sustainability of what we understand as development. Equally, both realms are important, and therefore I am particularly glad on this deliberation that you've put across. While we have the ministry, very ministry, which has come into existence, for the simple reason that we probably need to address the question of how various indigenous local systems of healing have flourished in the country. Despite having flourished, despite having provided services, we still, have not been able to give them the due that they require. And the point I'm trying to make is, places where the health system cannot reach, particularly in terms of the remoteness, but that's where the local healing traditions become vital. That's where it's a local knower of the medicinal system who comes to the rescue of what is needed for the healthcare provisioning of the people. So what perhaps becomes important, that this process of states' effort in recognizing this importance of the local healing is extremely important. And some of the young researchers like Dr. Guite, who have been working in this area, become extremely prominent when we are trying to attribute how exactly we draw connects of this regionality into the, what I would say, although I don't much like the phrase as such, mainstreaming of the regionality. We have various systems which have been put in place to be able to, let's say, code the local healing systems, code the substances which are available for healing. But then sometimes when you really introspect, you want to kind of question, are we trying to equate knowledge which transmits from one generation to the other, knowledge which has its own grandeur, to a knowledge which is restricted into some 5 or 6 years of training, and I'm referring to the modern medicine system, or the system in which we look at allopathy versus the rest of it, which are embedded in Ayush. So I look forward to the speaker today, and as much as I understand about her work, her indulgence with what Northeast has been in the larger context of the country, whether it is polity or it is indigenous systems of medicine, her contribution seems to be fairly remarkable, because her work initiates itself. I was just going through her, writings, which I could procure from the internet sources. And since I am her colleague, I'm also familiar with her work. I would say, to work on the connect between the world trade regimes to the local healing substances was almost unheard of when she started working on this area, and has managed to publish on it also. So I do look forward to listening to her ideas in terms of center staging the healing practices of Northeast and how they become vital in the larger frame of Ayush, not only Ayush, but also providing care to the larger people in general. Thank you, Dr. Vikas, once again for staging this webinar. And also, I apologize for not being part of your earlier lectures, but
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
this for sure is interesting. So I could not really say no to your invite, although I had other engagements which I reshuffled. So thank you so much, and over to you to invite your speaker, or if it is mandated for me as the presiding person. I very warmly welcome Dr. Guite to this evening's deliberation. Over to you, Dr. Guite, for your deliberations. And thank you for agreeing to be here with us today.
Madam, sorry for interruption. Some of the guests have joined from the South Africa. One of my friend, Professor Fokozani Suleiman, has joined from the Johannesburg University, and one of my friend, Professor Salamat, had joined from Nigeria, and Professor Salamat, Professor Inka have also joined from the South Africa. So I would like to welcome all the guests who have joined from the South Africa, and Professor Mama Mosi will also join after, I think, the 20 minutes, and Saili has joined from the Austria. So on behalf of the Indian Research Scholars Association, I would like to welcome all the guests. So over to you. Thank you, ma'am.
I think, because it might be a good idea to say a couple of lines about the association, because not all of us, even if all of us are familiar with it, it's always a good idea to reiterate what the association stands for.
Okay.
Over
So
to you, Vikas.
so
Just a couple of lines.
just now, ma'am, or after the lecture, I will.
Okay, if you think you want to do it after,
Yes,
the lecture,
yes,
then
ma'am.
we won't get into the time which you have allotted to Dr. Guite. Over to you, Dr. Guite.
Thank you so much,
Yes.
ma'am. And it's your, uh, I would say, humility of Acharya ma'am, not to take the credit of what I am today in terms of my academic journey. For the audience who are not aware about it, I have done my MPhil and PhD under Professor Acharya, and really feel privileged that she presided over this uh, talk today evening, because in the talk I intend to cover my journey into understanding local health traditions from the local to the global, and the intersectional perspective which is shaped by her in throughout my research journey with my MPhil and my PhD. And after joining the Center of Social Medicine and Community Health, it continues. So it was a very enriching journey with ma'am. That's what I would like to acknowledge in front of the audience. And also I thanked Indian Research Scholar Association, the Northeast Wing, I believe. Yeah, today, who are organizing this talk and inviting me to deliver on a topic which I have been engaging with since 2001, to be precise. And it started with my master's in social work from Delhi School of Social Work. Then that was in 2001. Then I got a campus recruitment with the Foundation for Ecological Security. Then I was here with the Foundation for Ecological Security for 2 months to do my internship, which is a prerequisite, or I would say requirement, to able to finish masters in social work course. So that's where my first interface with uh, medicinal plant sector was introduced to me. So I was in Pithoragarh district, and I was given a project to work on the medicinal plant sector, which was funded by Wildlife Institute, and it was looking into the various aspects of that sector, from from the cultivation, conservation, preservation, protection, and then the commercialization. Health was not there at all in terms of what they were talking about. It was more of a from a environmental and also from a economic commercial perspective. But while doing that placement, I got selected for a Viva in the center here in JNU. So I was wondering what should be my synopsis that I should be preparing for the Viva. So this research has kind of, make me look more into how can I connect this with public health from the health aspects. So I prepared the synopsis from that aspect in terms of the how it addressed to the primary healthcare needs at the rural and at a very remote context where there are absence of the so-called modern health services. And that was what I pitching for my MPhil synopsis. So obviously I was grilled in the Viva, and I think that time that was in 2001. So the relevance in public health was recognized, in terms of the alternative system of medicine. The center has a very dominant biomedicine perspective. Like, for the audience who doesn't know about the Center of Social Medicine and Community Health, we have 50% of faculty from medical sciences and 50% from social sciences. So it's a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach in understanding public health. So that's why I was saying that while entering the center with that synopsis and with that proposal, the intersectionality perspective was developed through the coursework, where we try to look into the social science approaches in understanding health from an intersectional lens. So this is a few background in which I would like to share my brief talk today. Maybe 40-30 minutes I would take another these things, and uh, uh, that too in the context of Northeast region. And I, being from that region, has the advantage of understanding that sometimes it can be a disadvantage also for a researcher, because you tend to be biased, and which an outsider may look at neutrally, which outsider may see it. You, being an insider, tend to inadvertently overlook those aspects. But still, then let me try my share my understanding of this local health traditions in terms of the intersectional lens. So, if you allow, I share my slide. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
So,
Yes.
yeah. So this is what in the slide itself I am putting in the first book which was published out of my MPhil research. It's on indigenous medicine and healthcare among the Paite tribe of Manipur. I belong to a Paite tribe of Manipur from Churachandpur district, and in the recent Manipur conflict and violence, uh, this is one of the tribe which is seriously impacted and highest, I would say, casualty in this entire violence. So till date, the community cannot access the Imphal airport, and when we have to visit, we have to go through Mizoram Aizawl airport and then come to Churachandpur district, where most Paite populations are residing in Churachandpur districts of Manipur. So I did my first study with this tribe, and Northeast India. For those who have joined us from outside our country, African countries, as Vikash was sharing with us, Northeast India is constituted as, 8 states within the larger Indian Union, and this is in it's bordering on the border of India and China, India and Bangladesh, and India and Bhutan, and India and Nepal. So this is the location. And the location, in terms of the geographical location, it's in the Himalayan range, and it is one of the 6 biodiversity hotspots in the world. So this is one which is one reason for conflict or resource, which is the conflict which is on ethnic lines, which is on identity, which is on resources. So these are some of the problem which the region is dealing with. And therefore, when we talk about the local health traditions of the Northeast India and the rich biodiversity and the rich traditional medicinal knowledge, we cannot avoid the political context, the conflict. So this is some intersectional analysis which I would like to bring in, and the conceptual framework in terms of, I would say, when we talk about the diversity, as I say, it is one of the biodiversity hotspot, and how there are other intersectionality, which how the local health tradition lies at the intersection of multiple structural determinants. Here you see gender, ethnicity, the geography, socioeconomic, marginality. Then you have how it has also impacted, translated into governance, health policy, intellectual property, and healthcare access. And there is a strong cultural identity which is attached to the local health tradition, right? So this is one the conceptual framework which brought in. Then now the question, why an intersectionality perspective? The slide is visible. If there is anything, please let me know if it's moving or not.
Yes, ma'am, moving.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So intersectionality, it's originally developed by Kimberly Crenshaw, which explains how multiple identities and structural systems simultaneously influence experiences of privilege and disadvantage, which we very much use in how understanding health status and health outcome. And then how, especially from a gender perspective also, in gender studies also, we see the intersection of how a woman, if a woman is from a community of scheduled tribe and also living in a lower socioeconomic status, so how the vulnerability has doubled and tripled. So this kind of study in terms of discrimination, which Kimberley has done, so this is very much relevant when we look into the local health traditions, because it intersects with all the other aspects of social, economic determinants. So in Northeast India, health traditions cannot be understood solely through culture or medicine. Rather, they are shaped by overlapping dimensions. So, which may include, indigenous identity. When we talk about governance, tribal governance, which is tribal governance again is very unique in terms of every tribal indigenous communities in the Northeast region are governed by their customary laws and practices, right? And the Panchayati Raj Act in terms of local self-governance. So most Panchayati Raj Act are irrelevant when it comes to the tribal customary law. Till date, the tribals are following their customary law. When it comes to in terms of either deciding in terms of, let's say, land regulations, or if there is any murder, or if there is any kind of crime in the in the villages. So these are some of the contextual practices which is there in the region. And again, let me just bring back to the Northeast India as such. It's not a homogeneous entity, which most of us or researcher or academia or in the mainland understanding of like looking at one homogeneous entity. It is heterogeneous. It constitutes of, as I say, 8 states, and within one state also you have various kind of ethnic groups. Northeast India have around 220 indigenous tribes. So those tribes have possess distinct medicinal knowledge system. They have distinct local health traditions. So the in the intersectionality, or I would say the overlapping dimensions are, as I say, indigenous identity, tribal governance, remote geography, gender roles, traditional ecological knowledge, economic marginalization, environmental change, the state policy, and the colonial and post-colonial history. Till this time, it is the colonial and the post-colonial history which is still creating a conflict where you have political leaders, using this history to capitalize on being always on power, or for their own, I would say, propagating their own political aims or interests, which is where there is a distorted the colonial and post-colonial history, which is always been dug up by people who are in power. So this is why an intersectionality perspective is important. Now, when we talk about ethnicity and indigenous identity, as I said, that Northeast India have 220 indigenous tribes, and then communities are not homogeneous. But when it comes to traditional healers, and traditional healers also, they don't not serve mainly as a healthcare providers, but they are also as a custodian of cultural identity. So, like examples of indigenous tribes, like you have the Nagas in Nagaland, you have the Mizos. Within the Mizos also you have again different ethnic group. Within the Naga also you have, like in Manipur, you have a mix of, the Meitei, the majority, the Kuki-Zomi, and you have the Nagas. Within the Nagas you have the Tangkhul, you have the Rongmei, Mao. So, there are so many. And then in Assam, you have the Bodo tribes. In Arunachal, you have the Apatani tribes. Or in Meghalaya, you have the Khasi, the Garo tribes. So these are the ethnicity where each tribe have a traditional healers, um, who are also a custodians of cultural identity. So the challenges which may include in terms of the local health traditions can be in the cultural assimilation. There is also a loss of the indigenous languages with the modernization and globalization, and also the migration pattern which is happening in terms of uh, uh, searching for a better opportunities, because in the northeast regions are majorly deprived of infrastructure and deprived of opportunities. So this is one which dimensions of intersectionality. The second is the gender and knowledge transmissions. So when we talk about the local health traditions, if we look at the role of the women, women are always the key knowledge holders. Like when it comes to childbirth, you have the midwives, the traditional birth attendants, but still, when it comes to recognitions and authority, it's always very limited. And but the women always play a role in terms of they are central to caregiving, and there is a need for integrating them into the institutionalized child delivery services, which the Indian government did tried integrating the traditional birth attendants. There have been training of the traditional birth attendants, because there is Alma Ata declarations on integrating the traditional and the modern healthcare system, and the goal of health for all by 2000. So in that process, the traditional birth attendants were integrated. But how far is it able to address to giving that primary healthcare and health for all? That's at this juncture also we are seeing that there are certain gaps in terms of midwife, and then uh, in the primary health center or in the community health center, the integration is not effective in terms of meeting the demands of the population. So the besides the midwifery role, women also have this knowledge in terms of home remedies like herbal medicine preparations, then maternal care, child nutrition, household, taking care of the food and nutrition aspects of the household family member. And besides that, they also have a knowledge of seed conservations, like in terms of agriculture or in terms of uh, vegetations. And they also have a knowledge of medicinal plant cultivation and conservations. So, but as I say, women often remain invisible in terms of when it comes to framing a policy for local health traditions, integration, or at the global discourse in terms of benefit sharing or in terms of profit maximizing from their knowledge system. And they receive very little financial support. They rarely benefit from commercializations, and they also possess limited knowledge when it comes to rights, when it comes to their rights, like for example intellectual property rights, how how biopiracy can happen, how should they protect their own knowledge and all those things. So these are some intersectionality highlights, how indigenous women experience it compounded disadvantages, which is based on the gender and ethnicity and then poverty. Now, I can come to geography and healthcare accessibility. Here in the slide, I am putting our ICSSR project, which we have done in 2018 to 21. It's finding, I wanted to discuss its finding here. And another ICSSR project, which I did with Central University of Punjab, they are the main project director. So here, even in this study, look into the availability and accessibility of healthcare facility with special reference to the hill districts of Manipur. So, this two finding has kind of highlight the gender components which I talked about previously, and also in terms of the geography and healthcare accessibility. Uh, in this study, where both the study, one looks at Manipur, the other study looks into 4 states of Northeast: Nagaland, Mizoram, Arunachal, and Meghalaya. And in this, the outcome, or I would say more or less in briefly, what we can see is that many villages which are located in the mountainous terrain, dense forest or river, island, or in the border region, they have a limited access to biomedical healthcare. And that limitation increases their dependence on local health traditions. So this is also one aspect of intersectionality, where geographical isolation simultaneously helps them in preserving traditional knowledge. At the same time, it restricts their healthcare access, and also it also limits research by people like us, academicians, or that limited geographical isolation is a huge challenge. And we don't have that kind of research investment and funding, which will facilitate us to even go and reach out to the remotest area. So what happened? Definitely hampers on the policy implementation. So the reality was not able to be discovered through our academic research. Even in these two research, most of the kind of funding that we get in social sciences limited us to be a kind of a very convenient sampling research. So this is one disadvantage that the northeastern region face in terms of the geographical isolation, which limits our research access to the reality of the region. Then next is the biodiversity and ecological sustainability. Here, the picture which I put is an outcome of my PhD thesis, where I tried looking into the global discourse and local realities towards indigenous medicine. And in this study, me and Professor Acharya has developed a good conceptual framework trying to understand what the larger global protocols or regulations have an impact at the local level. So, as I say, Northeast India is one of the world's biodiversity hotspots, and the dependence on medicinal plants which are growing in the wild, which are not cultivated. And not only the medicinal plants, but most of the daily food and nutrition. For example, extractions of mushrooms in the wild. Like this is the season, especially, you see wild mushrooms coming, and then there are many other which are also having a good nutritive values, which you cannot cultivate actually, but people are depending on them. Similarly, in terms of, and then through that knowledge and through that trial and error, they also understand what are the medicinal properties. So forests, sacred groves, shifting cultivation landscapes, wetlands, mountain ecosystem. So this is where the medicinal systems depend upon. And the threat also include in terms of deforestation, mining, infrastructure development, the climate change, and the invasive species. So these points which I highlighted one by one, in fact, for example, deforestation itself is also one huge area for research. So, but broadly, I'm trying to highlight where these components and where the intersectionality, the interdisciplinary approach is required in terms of understanding the local health traditions. So what happened is when there is this loss of biodiversity because of deforestation, because of mining, it directly threatens the indigenous healthcare. And the regulation of the state. For example, in my this PhD thesis, when I was looking into the state of Manipur in terms of the state regulations, what is the state role in terms of the intellectual property rights. And I also mentioned a case study in it was in which year I forgot. There was this psycho cancer medicine. Uh, yes, this was in around 2005, six. Sorry, I exactly don't remember the year, but I did mention in the book and in the thesis how giving an example of how the state is not at all prepared in terms of looking into the patenting or understanding how to protect and regulate if the plant has that medicinal properties to heal cancer. So how is the state coming into the picture and promoting it, preserving it, and conserving it? It's actually the role and the knowledge or the investment of the state is very minimal, or I would say it's absent entirely during those days. But now we are in 2026. This research was conducted, the field work and all was conducted around 2000, between 2005 to 2009. So there were many conferences which were happening during that time in terms of the BIMSTEC countries, like the Department of Forests of Manipur, and there you have the National Medicinal Plant Board, and then the Ministry of Health collectively coming together, having a conference on medicinal plant sector in Manipur, and in particular, and the entire Northeast in general. So you have uh, people from BIMSTEC country coming and deliberating. So I was also part of that conference, and I use that as one technique, like what we call it as consultative meetings, and incorporated in my thesis in terms of the global discourse and what should be the steps to be taken in regulating biodiversity and ecological sustainability in that region. I will be coming in the next in terms of the IPR and all, but before that, we can look into the marginality and the socio-economic status as one dimensions in the intersectionality that we need to look into. Like poor household, they often depend upon traditional medicine because of affordability, accessibility, cultural familiarity. And I, in a paper where Professor Acharya is a guest editorial in this paper, in this journal called CAST, a global journal on social exclusion. I attempted to write a paper in this regard in terms of how addressing hegemony within the system of medicine for an inclusive and sustainable health system. So the case of traditional medicine, not specifically in the context of Northeast, but definitely the arguments have come out from that experience of research, and then how I try to look into that intersectionality in terms of professionalization, in terms of globalization, and in terms of the politics of knowledge. Like the question of like, why is the indigenous knowledge inferior to the biomedicinal knowledge? The larger question of, is it because the knowledge holders, they belong to the marginal community, the community who are at the periphery, who are at the remotest region of our country, who have no formal education? So is it because of that, or is it the knowledge per se is inferior? But in reality, uh, it is the knowledge holders who are inferior, not the knowledge per se, right? So this kind of hegemony, hierarchy within the system of medicine uh, gets reflected because the people who are possessing those knowledge belongs to a marginal section of our society. They belongs to lower socio-economic status, right? So these are another area which uh, is an intersectional dimension that we need to look into it, because at the end of the day, when we have to address on public health implications, or on governance, or on policy implications. All these things needs to be contextualized and has to fit into that in order to understand the issue in totality. At present, what happened is like, okay, the government is coming up with investing in uh, suddenly, you started talking about traditional knowledge in different fields. So, but we have to contextualize in order to actually understand what traditional knowledge is all about. So another dimension which I want to highlight here is about age and knowledge, like how elders they hold knowledge, how the migration of youth also disrupt transmission, and how there is this pattern uh, pose a huge risk of knowledge loss. So an article which I wrote in for the Help Age India Research and Development Journal, Elderly as Repository of Indigenous Medicinal Knowledge in India's Northeastern region. So in this paper, I talk about the type of traditional healing practices and how it is important to include the elders in our policy deliberations, and when we talk about understanding or protecting the traditional indigenous medicine. Now, coming to governance and policy. So, governance, okay, just a minute. Yeah. So, governance and policy. Now, as I just said, India recognizes Ayush system, but provides comparatively limited institutional recognition for many local health traditions. We have the Northeast Institute of Folk uh, Folk Healing. Why am I forgetting right now? It's in Pasighat, the Northeast Institution for Folk and Traditional Medicine. But it says folk and traditional medicine, but the dominance of Ayush is there. Like you have from the administrative hierarchy or people in positions, they are all from Ayush background. One thing is that people who have the knowledge of local health traditions, they don't they don't come through the formal education. That is one, obviously. So when you have to decide on eligibility, if you don't recognize them through a certification or standardization of their knowledge, so that is also one way of excluding them. So in order to include them at the governance and the policy level, so one has to have the uh, to address the policy gaps. The current policy gaps, which include like inadequate documentation, as I say, is absence of certification pathways, limited research funding, the weak community participations, and then the fragmented conservation policies are there. So intersectionality here emphasizes that governance as a structural determinant rather than merely an administrative issue. So that is what we need to recognize. Then this the Gazette of Meghalaya and the Transdisciplinary University in Bangalore and the Gazette of Meghalaya. Recently, we had a policy deliberation with the Bharat Soch Foundation of India, which is a think tank, which is a very new, recent established to promote indigenous knowledge systems. So medicinal knowledge is one, right? So here, the person from Pasighat who talks about how Meghalaya government has come up with this notification of certification of the traditional healers and how they have to be part of the state policy on local medicinal knowledge. And Transdisciplinary University has been working in trying to make the Indian government understand what local health traditions and what should be the implementation framework in the context of the national health policy. So I'm just highlighting how the governance and policy aspects is also one which should not be just an administrative issue, but it should be a policy. It should be a policy deliberation uh, at the local and to the national level too. So another dimension is intellectual property rights and traditional knowledge. Here you see what traditional medicinal knowledge is one aspect of the larger traditional knowledge. So when we talk about traditional knowledge in the present time, there are knowledge on medicine and healthcare, agriculture and farming, biodiversity, wisdom, traditional knowledge on cultural practices, your art, and then your handicrafts, and all those things are there. And then social system in terms of governance, customary practices, climate adaptations in terms of how, especially in the context of Northeast, how people are having more in terms of climate knowledge on climate adaptations. Those shifting cultivation has been practiced since time immemorial in that region, but how are they maintaining that balance? And the signals and the signs which they understand through the other wild animals or wild visitation. So these are some of the things which has to be contextualized and understand. And one policy in terms of traditional knowledge for the northern part of India may not be relevant to the northeastern part, may not be relevant to southern part. So these are some of the things when we talk about traditional knowledge. We cannot generalize as one. So it has always to be contextualized as one size doesn't fits all, right? So in that aspect, another is the intellectual property rights, where if these intellectual property rights are relevant in terms of patent, industrial design, trademarks, plant variety protection, geographical indication, trade secrets, and copyrights. And the concern here when it comes to traditional medicinal knowledge is that the intellectual property rights treat this kind of knowledge as to be commercialized, and where the benefits has to be with the innovator or the owner. But here in traditional medicinal knowledge, the knowledge is with the community, right? So the knowledge is not private. There may be some which are private where the healer, they themselves discover it, but most of the knowledge are in the public domain. So there has been a conflict and a debate between two groups, like the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD, which are the environmentalists, and on the other hand, you have the trade advocates, who wanted to say that the benefits should be there has to be a commercialization benefits to go to the innovator. So in the larger debate, we see that the CBD and the Nagoya Protocol, they all talk about benefits sharing. So this is what was looked into in my thesis, and where when we talk about the discourse, the global discourse on traditional medicine. So the Indian legal and the institutional framework, where India has the Biological Diversity Act, and which was in 2002, which talks about benefit sharing, but it doesn't always have ways for communities to give their consent. They'll say there has to be a benefit sharing, but there is no ways provisions for the communities to give their consent, whether they would like their knowledge to be shared, or they would like their knowledge to be within themselves. And in India, we have this, under this legal framework, the Traditional Knowledge Digital Library. It was created, to stop people from patenting basically the Ayurvedic formulas that are already known to the public. We see the cases of the neem, patent cases of the neem, turmeric, the basmati rice cases. Right? We have this issue in terms of the major biopiracy cases, which is involving the Indian traditional knowledge, right? So the local health traditions also become a risk, under this regime. And uh, I mean, the I would say if we talk about the international treaties, the TRIPS agreement, which was in 1994, and then the Convention on Biological Diversity, this was in 1992, and that traditional knowledge should be shared. And the Nagoya Protocol, which is in 2010, it's all about access and benefits sharing system. And then comes the World Intellectual Property Organization Intergovernmental Committee, which is also still talking about a legal tool for the traditional knowledge system. So when it comes to traditional knowledge system, the medicinal knowledge also comes into this domain. So that's where the risk is, and that's where we can use this legal framework for identity also, and for addressing sustainable livelihood. uh, One can always extract benefit from them. But again, even in this entire process, again, when we talk about the intersectionality and the marginalized community, they are always marginalized in this profit or in this process of benefit sharing also. So that's where one needs to be cautious, and that's where there are institutions and NGOs and organizations working to kind of document the knowledges of the local health traditions, and then the biodiversity in terms of the ethno-botanical knowledge. So all those things are happening in a very in active way, I would say, at this contemporary times. So there are cases of biopiracy. There are reports from media and NGO in terms of how the chemical properties or the medicinal properties are pirated through, sometimes even it's through publication, through academic publication itself. When we publish it, so people gain knowledge out of that. And most of the Ayurvedic formulas, or let's say the within the Indian system of medicine itself, the raw materials, they are procured from our Himalayan region only, including the northeastern. You have the Uttarakhand, Himachal, this the Himalayan belt. So where there are rare medicinal properties, but having a very high international market value. So that's how it was done. In fact, when I had my internship in 2001 in Pithoragarh district, there was this medicinal plants called some kira, the local name. It looks like a worm, and it is at the international market used as an aphrodisiac, and it's used like majorly in feeding the horses, because the horses they get the whatever the kick in terms of when they have that, and then there are strong chances of them to win the race. So you know how the trade secrets of medicinal plants is also one big problem, which is not even regulated even at this present time. So the nexus is huge in terms of the trade secrets. So that's where the vulnerability, that's where the questions of how do we protect those challenges at the under the legal global framework under the WTO. So, okay, so before concluding, just look at the intersectional challenges in local health tradition and public health implications. Like, this is more or less briefly of how I look at it. And then the challenges, how gender, the key challenge is invisible women healers, and the public health implication in terms of loss of maternal health knowledge. Then ethnicity, there is key challenge of cultural erosion. Then because of that, you have a reduced healthcare diversity. Then geography, the remote settlement, unequal healthcare access, biodiversity, medicinal plant loss because of biopiracy, unregulated mechanism that we have. The state itself is also part of the process, the corrupt system. So it reduced, healthcare options for the people. Then governance, there's policy exclusion, which is entirely happening when it comes to the local health traditions. Even when we talk about the Indian system of medicine, there is this codified and non-codified. The Ayush is codified. The non-codified is the local health traditions. Again, even in that, since if we don't recognize, if we don't formalize, then it will be continued exclusion will happen at the policy level also. So then when it at the policy level there is exclusion, then what do we have? We have a very weak institutional support. No investment in research, no investment in formalizing, no investment in certifications. Then economy, the commercial exploitations, which leads to community disempowerment. Education, there is, as I talk about the knowledge of elder as a repository of knowledge, there is a declining intergenerational transfer, then knowledge extinction happen. So though the public health significance, we can see that local health traditions contribute to primary health care, preventive nutrition, mental well-being, maternal and child health, chronic disease management. Especially nowadays, now the biomedicine has few answers when it comes to non-communicable diseases, the chronic diseases, lifestyle diseases, and now we are trying to go back to the local health traditions, which talks about aligning with nature, which talks about balance. So these are some of the things how it contribute to the public health significance. Then climate adaptation, pandemic preparedness. So their integration, the integration of local health traditions into the health system can improve culturally appropriate, accessible, and sustainable care. In the slide, I was showing this as one. I would just want to give you an example of the recent Manipur conflict, where this study was done by Jindal University, where a paper was published out of that study. In even the people who are in the relief camp, where there is an absence of absence of formal health network, health services. So a number of informal and alternative medical practices intersect with sometimes operate independently from Manipur's formal healthcare system. So here in their research, they identified three distinct strands of medical practice. One is the private diagnostic services, spiritual healing, and traditional medicine that form a part of a broader pluralistic healthcare network. And these practices, in times of calamities and conflict, have often filled that critical gaps of healthcare access, both before and after the onset of the conflict. So yeah, with this I may conclude suggesting some policy recommendation which comes out of this intersectional analysis that we have done. Like there has to be a community-led documentation, recognition of indigenous healers, gender responsive policies, biodiversity conservation, equitable benefit sharing, interdisciplinary research, participatory governance, integration with primary healthcare, the youth engagement, and climate resilience strategies. Here, in these points, the interdisciplinary research is what we are seeing here. The recent findings of researcher of cancer fighting potential of traditional Konya Naga herbal medicine, and this research is with University of, just give me a few minutes, I have to, or you can always Google about the details, but what I want to say is that this is a interdisciplinary research which is happening with the community, with the knowledge holder, and with the university from the Department of Life Sciences. So this is how things can work out in terms of if we want to actually advance the local health traditions for healthcare needs and for livelihood sustainability and also for economic benefits. And youth engagement is one that now with the kind of artificial intelligence or maybe the kind of social media platforms we have, there can be a lot of scope for innovation in terms of looking at healthcare from a different dimensions in terms of aligning our knowledge with the present contemporary challenges in terms of various lifestyle diseases, right? So I would conclude by this. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Guite, for bringing these aspects to the audience in a very, very neatly knitted arguments. I am glad that you brought out certain points which kind of make us think about where are we locating the connect between the remoteness of local healing traditions and the process through which it is being, if I may take the state's reference in terms of mainstreaming. While we do see that government's attention, the state's attention is there for the mainstreaming of traditional systems, local healing systems, but then without roping in the communities, without roping in the members of the community who are active in local healing traditions, it perhaps becomes difficult to revitalize local healing traditions. And I'm using revitalize very consciously because, like you pointed out, the codified versus uncodified. While Ayush, the one which is within the bracket of Ayush, is fairly much codified. But then local healing traditions, the fact that it is not codified, and who decides how and why and when should a system be codified, right? And here is perhaps that crux with which you started, the knower versus the non-knower. Just because the traditional healing systems come from a set of people who are practicing, if I may say, the herbal care in terms of treating the ailments. So we have herbalism, if I may use that phrase, or we have a very strong group where we envisage bone setters as bone setting communities, and then we have the traditional birth attendants. I think these are the three main pillars of local healing system, which do not get recognized within the larger system for the simple reason which you very rightly point out, because of the social ladder in which they rest. Because till date, with all the trust that we have put on maternal and child health care, 11% of the maternity care is still being provided by the traditional birth attendants, as we learn from the NFH's data. I'm not talking about the data, the recent most, but I'm talking about the previous round. So the point, therefore, I think becomes very important is, which you sum up very well when you point out for us that what matters is how the state looks at this interface vis-a-vis intersectionality, where we cannot leave behind community members of the local healing systems across different layers of community and their intersection with governance in the fashion that they get their due justice. And I think I want to bring in the norm of, how do we see their work if we trace local healing system as a form of occupation. Decent work regime, where do we locate them? And we are talking about sustainable development, wherein a lot of material, substance for local healing is being derived from natural resources, be it flora and fauna, or be it something which is from within the surface of the earth. So the point, therefore, I think becomes very, very important context when you also relate with the policy environment. If you look at how the existing policies, review that local healing traditions, although are fairly have been entrenched in history, where have they been relegated to in today's regime? And market's role, we can't forget. How market has brought in certain parts of the local healing substances, if I may use, in reviving some substances in bottled form through different regimes of drug industry, while some others still remain outside that regime. So I think when we look at this intersectionality, across different zones, market and its role, industry and its role also becomes very, very important in terms of particularly when we want to look at the resurgence of the policy, because it is not only at the national level but also at the global level where traditional systems of medicine and healing become very relevant, particularly in the 21st century that we are living. And the notion of health itself has moved towards good health, wherein we are trying to talk about the promotive levels where you don't need to go to the clinical care, and for that perhaps nature is where you want to resort to. You want to go and breathe fresh air, you want to go walk, you want to go do yoga. All of that perhaps is in some kind of reversion to what local healing systems have been actually promoting and propagating also. So I think that comes out fairly clearly from your deliberation, and I am particularly kind of thankful to you for bringing in some of these institutions, so which are very active in bringing the connect, or rather forging the connect between the local healing systems and how the state and the governance can be put together. And Pasighat Institute, like you very rightly said. So emerging from perhaps the anthropological literature, the nuance of the local healing practitioners, local healing systems, very often we want to give it a lesser realm of importance as folk medicine, ethnomedicine, indigenous healing systems, etc., etc., very consciously creating that hierarchy, that the Western modern medicine is perhaps a little higher than the folk systems or local healing systems. And that's perhaps what I see Dr. Guite's deliberation trying to make an attempt to break that, or at least raise our consciousness that why do we see this two systems in this level of hierarchy? Because local healing systems are filling in the gap where the conventional modern medicine is not able to reach. And very rightly, the TBAs and the bone settlements do bring in that realm of filling the gap from across the systems that we're trying to connect the two. So I think that is where I would really want to thank Dr. Guite for bringing up some of these very important point for our staging some of these points. And I would also thank the association for giving me this opportunity to chair the session in which Dr. Guite, and as she has already said, it's my pleasure for sure to have chaired this session, particularly as I have been familiar with her work as her mentor in more than one way, from supervising her doctoral research to perhaps intersecting with her in terms of writing and researching on the various topics that she has been interested. So thank you, Dr. Vikash, for giving us this opportunity, particularly me, in feeling very good about having chaired this session, particularly because just a few days earlier, I was the speaker and my doctoral supervisor was in the audience. So it made me relive those moments. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. Over to you, Dr. Vikash. Or do we have to open it for questions?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Lokpaji.
Okay. Okay, so I think I don't know what is the timeline, because I was just looking at the timeline. It's 6-7.
We have crossed the time limitation, but if Dr. Guite want to take some question, then we can. Otherwise, we will end the session.
Yeah. As chair, I think I would use my prerogative to ask for some very pertinent questions if the audience has. And I'm sure Dr. Guite will be able to address those questions if there are any. Yes. And like I said, the deliberations has been very organized and very informative, particularly for those of us who are not very familiar with this regime of work. So we open it for your observations, your comments, your suggestions. because I think it's important to take this conversation forward. And I look up to the association for probably staging something subsequently, especially that we have listeners from across the globe. At least a lot of good number is from the African country, and I'm glad there are people from Nigeria, and Zambia is Zimbabwe also, I think, or is it Namibia? I think Namibia is what I noticed. Thank you for being here, and I'm actually reliving my days in Botswana, seeing you all on board on this and in this evening for the deliberation by Dr. Guite. So I would be happy to hear the questions from you. Um, I don't see any in the chat box
Yes,
also.
yes. So, participants, now session is open. If any participants have questions, so please unmute yourself and you can ask directly your question to madam. Yes, please. Somiji, yes, please.
Okay, okay. All right. First and foremost, thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful lecture. I have one question. As you have mentioned that in the traditional healing system, knowledge is with the community and it is at a public
Somiji,
domain,
it's
right?
good if you will introduce yourself, then you will.
Okay, sorry. Yes, I am Somi Raikan. I'm also from Manipur. I am also the executive member from Manipur University. So, continuing with my questions, of course, ma'am has rightly put up that knowledge in the traditional healing system is with the community and it is at the public domain of the people at the margin, at the periphery. But at the same time, I see the intersections between modernity and at the same time, when we see this kind of knowledge, it's not textualized and it's not codified, right? So memory becomes a very important play here. But I see a trend where communications between grandparents, let's say, and even our fathers and children are lacking in the age of AI and in the age of social media. So I feel like there's an important impact here when it comes to our knowledge of the traditional healing systems, and more younger generations are going to the professional modern medicines than the traditional. So how do you see this interface between these globalizations and our traditional knowledge systems impact even in today's academic discourse? Yeah, that is the questions that I want to put. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Guite may want to respond to it.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, Somi, thank you for that question. It's a very relevant and pertinent question because here again we also see in terms of how the challenge of how the younger generations, as you are saying, because again here what happened is the government is investing and promoting on the biomedicine, and you see this the connect of how if we look at the local health tradition, till date, the practice and the tradition is alive just because of the popular support of the people. We see that the state patronage on local health tradition is entirely missing, or it's very minuscule patronage we receive, and it's surviving entirely on the support of the popular support of the community people. So, in order to make it, I would say, an equalizer with biomedicine, we really have to invest a lot in terms of how do we make that knowledge system. Either we wanted to see it parallelly or either we wanted to integrate into it. That certification, standardization, licensing, and then promoting. Okay, let's say even if I can give you just an example of my experience with a month. It's just a month experience in University of Toronto. I was in this Center for Indigenous Health Research, and this was part of my Sastri Indo Canada Institute Mobility Program. So, in that Center of Indigenous Health Research, they have a professor from from their indigenous health system. So they are called as the knowledge keeper. Okay, Okay, and they have been given that status of a professor. They have a, like what we have in the academic room, cabin, and everything. So their knowledge is used. They are given that opportunity or that equal status with any formal professor to go and deliver a lecture on indigenous knowledge system or what they practice. So that's how I got to interact with that knowledge keeper and their role in the university entire system. Like for example, when it comes to mental health issues, like the student have that option either to go to a psychologist. If the psychologists feel that okay, this issue is beyond the understanding of biomedicine or the kind of training they have, so they refer to the indigenous healer or the knowledge keeper. So that kind of functional integration is there and functional practice is there. So my answer to your question will be, we have to invest a lot, we have to streamline many things, institutionalize it, integrate it within, mainstream them within our, either it can be in a hospital or in our university setting or in our primary healthcare setup. So that requires a policy intervention. Without that, we cannot bring about that change. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Guite, and thank you, Dr. Somi, for bringing up that question. I just wanted to add very quickly to what Dr. Guite said. While we are resting a lot on the state's responsibility, for sure, a state is responsible for a lot of mechanisms which are created for any sector for that matter. So is the public health sector. Now, what perhaps we also need to introspect when we say public health system or the framework within which public health is functioning, a larger context or larger share of public health is vested in the modern Western medicine, right? But then we know that given the kinds of regimes we are in, modern Western medicine has remained outside the access of many people. A larger set of population is not able to access the care from the conventional modern medicine system within public health. Many a times is the time which I do not have to invest in the public sector facility, and many a times I do not have the money to invest in the private sector. And therefore, investing in local healing systems is not just the state's responsibility, it's also the responsibility of the industry and the way market will function given the mindsets of you and I. How did we forget the local systems which were available in the kitchen, which were available in what they say, Dadi Nani Ka Nuksa, the grandmother's, advice on healing. How did we forget? We largely forgot because there were bombardment of advertisements which told us if you take glycodin, your cough will go away. They made us forget that I could grind the ginger into honey and have it and get some respite from let's say, cough which I was kind of experiencing. So the point perhaps is for us at this moment is to see this intersection in terms of our own mindsets also. How did we as people get influenced by market? How do we get influenced by the industry which creates this market to influence us and makes us shift from one to the other regime? So I would not absolve ourselves also in terms of contributing to this hierarchical position that local healing traditions have been relegated to. So that was one point I thought I must bring in addition to, or the substantiating what Dr. Guite was saying.
That angle is very important at these contemporary times of commercialization and where market profit making is dominating all the policy makers also. So policy also comes with what? With seeing that what the interest of the market rather than the interest of the public.
Yeah. And this whole dilemma of codification versus not codified versus codified itself, to me, has a lot of revisiting to be
Yes.
done. Intergenerational transfer does have this lacunae of reduction in knowledge sphere, which is fair. But then it's important to then address that. How do we retain that intergenerational transfer of knowledge without reduction? Right? Can we have, like Dr. Guite said, if certain states can have local traditional healers as part of the medical education system, why do we refrain from? We refrain from, to my mind, as much as I understand, because we are very, very hierarchical in our understanding. We live in those hierarchies. We don't want to come out of those hierarchies. So, any other question for Dr. Guite?
And also, ma'am, just adding the mindset of, if the local health tradition is helping people maintain their health, and if it's helping people to preventive measures, then where will our profit comes? The kind of investment that we make in modern drug and pharmaceutical companies, where will I earn our profits? So medicalization, because the local health tradition doesn't medicalize, and
Yes.
everything is normal. It is trying to make us align with our very own existence with
That's right.
nature. So that is also one angle.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Anything
Any
else?
other,
I
yeah,
think we are boring the audience, huh?
any other pointer, please come up. Otherwise, I would, I'm sure things are fairly clear, and I'm also looking at the time. So, thank you so much for this evening, and over to you, Dr. Vikas.
Yes, so ma'am, I would like to invite for the formal vote of thanks to Dr. Nemthianngai.
Thank you so much, Vikasa. It's my great privilege to have two. I'm so proud, ma'am. Ma'am, Nemthianngai Guite, ma'am, Professor, Associate Professor JNU, and her supervisor. It's You are blessed, ma'am. You are sharing screen with your supervisor in same platform. Professor Sanghamitra Sheel Acharya, ma'am. We are so grateful that you have been so humbly presided this session, entire lecture series of today's series, ma'am. Thank you so much for being such a sweet soul, ma'am. It's indeed like whatever you have mentioned. You have talked about advancing local health tradition of Northeast India, and being a Northeastern, I have been connecting throughout the sessions. You started with geographical biodiversity and ecological sustainability, and how you ended the I would like to add a point which you have mentioned at last, like how the traditional knowledge system are always being doubtful. We have a person, Yanung Jamos. She is very famous in Pasigat. So she is a traditional herbal medicine provider. So she is gaining a fame now, but still it's a questionable that whether the medicine which she provides it's it's competent enough with the medical we have allopathy. So, ma'am, your talk have been fruitful. We have learned a lot, and your the book you have mentioned in your start, Indigenous Medicine and Healthcare among Paite tribe of Manipur, and another book, Ethnomedicine and Travel Healing Practices in India. We are surely gonna search it in internet. Hope it is available in Flipkart or any other platform, ma'am.
Yeah,
It is it is
available.
available. It's available in Amazon, Flipkart, and I think most other platforms from where you can buy. You
Okay,
can
thank you so
directly.
much, ma'am, for sharing the books. And we are definitely, even the audience from Northeast, they are definitely gonna search for the book. And the the attracting point was how you mentioned about the institute, which we being a northeastern, we didn't knew that it's in our place. I'm from Arunachal, and I came to know today only that there is Northeastern Institute of Ayurveda and Folk Medicine Research in Pasigat. Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm going to visit this very soon. And you have talked about intellectual property rights and traditional medicine knowledge. The important which to be highlighted is benefit sharing, which I believe it's very important to know. And you have mentioned about patent right. Again, this was an important point to know about to share with our local healers. And again, intersectional challenges in local health tradition and public health implications. What I would like to thank you about that you have also recommended some policy recommendations, and in that, among many recommendations, you have included youth engagement, which I feel it's an attractive point, which you have given a responsibility to the youths on their soldier that what they have to do in future. So not even neglecting the geographical perspective, you have also recommended climate resilient strategies for the policymakers, which is important to take to undertake for its adaptation. And I would like to thank our entire team of Indian Research Scholar Association, Northeastern Wing, our coordinator, Dr. Vikash. Thank you for having us, and thank you, ma'am, both of you, for joining us. We hope to be connected again in another platform. Thank you so much, ma'am. Have